Hi, Kavi.
Hi, Michelle, how are you?
I'm well. How are you?
Very good, thank you.
What time is it for you?
It is 11:30 in the morning, 11:25 in the morning. So,
Okay, that's good. I was hoping it wasn't some strange hour of the night that we had you
nah,
staying up for this.
nah. Luckily, you had me choose the time, so it was easy.
That's right. That made it a bit more convenient.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
actually why we did it for that
yeah,
purpose.
yeah. It was very easy that way. I could rearrange my day, and I could choose the right day, and I chose
Perfect.
May. I chose May Day. So,
Perfect. Just so that you know, we already have about 12 people online who are
okay.
listening. So,
Okay.
have you watched any of the other presenters? Do you know the sort of feel of how it's flowing, or would you like me to explain it quickly?
Yeah, a quick explanation would be good. I've watched a couple, but a quick explanation would be useful.
No worries. So as we go through, just go with whatever your presentation is. I'll just jump in every so often just to either clarify something or maybe to ask a question that I think is relevant for the
Sure,
audience.
sure,
And then I'll give you a heads up when you've got about 5 minutes to go plus some question time.
sure.
As we're going through the process, people drop information into the chat and they also drop it into the Q&A. So I can manage that information. You don't have to worry about,
Sure.
looking through the thread to make sure you're missing something.
Okay.
And we are going to hope this so far today everything's gone really well with going into Facebook. Yesterday wasn't so well, so if you just
Okay.
give me a couple of minutes, I
Sure.
will be just dropping us live into the Facebook group. It won't take me long.
Is my light and is everything else clear, or do I need to make any changes?
Let me just, I can't actually see you at this point in time because it's going through
Okay.
the live streaming, but give me a
Okay.
second, I'll
No
let you
problem.
know.
No problem. All right. Thank you. I think there are people in the chat box who are already saying the light is clear. So,
Excellent.
thank you, Nosh. Thank you. Hey, Stephen.
I think Nosh deserves the frequent flyer card. I think they've been in every single presentation almost. It's fantastic.
Lovely.
Conversations. Almost there.
This Surendra from a remote village in India. Hi. Welcome to this chat, Surendra. Nice to see you here. The world is one full little village now. So it's good to have you here.
Are you saying that right now, or is that
No,
recorded?
I'm saying it as I'm seeing what's happening on the chat box.
Fantastic. Alrighty, I think we've almost got success.
Yes, Sajeev. Oh, hi, Sajeev. Hi, Shanti. Nice to see a whole lot of friends have come on board. Nice,
Oh,
Preetham.
that's lovely that you're getting the
Yes,
support. That's fantastic.
yes.
Okay, so we should be live on Facebook. So we are good to go. So a massive hello to everyone who is on Zoom and has pre-registered. And just so that you know, because you have the Zoom link, you can actually watch this talk back at any point in time from Kavi. So if you want to rewatch it or, send it to friends to watch, that's perfectly fine. And also a big hello to anyone who's joining us live on the Facebook feed through the Superhuman Summit group. We're on day 5, I believe. I always have to think about what day it is. Day 5 of our Superhuman Summit that, quite frankly, has been superhuman so far. There has been such a wide variety of perspectives and thoughts and contributions, and the thing that's just struck me in the whole process is just people's generosity and willingness to share who they are, including all of our attendees and participants who have very happily dropped their ideas and their answers in the chat box. So I'll encourage you to do exactly the same thing today. As we're going through and listening to Kavi's talk, and the title of his talk is Conversations That Change Your World. Now, I am super keen to hear this for a range of reasons, but The first reason is a selfish one. So my title is Chief Conversationalist, and I want to describe to you why I called myself that. So when I started my own business about 5 years ago, I was writing down, you know, would I call myself CEO or director, or what sort of title would I give to myself? And I really reflected, and I just thought, to me, literally the thing that changes the world is our conversations, and hence calling myself the Chief Conversationalist. So I am very excited to be able to hand over to you, Kavi, and hear your wisdom and insight on why conversations can change the world. So thank you very much. Over to you.
Thank you. I thought after you said that, we could all wrap this up and go home. Yeah, because yes, the conversations change our world, isn't it? In the world of social distancing, if there is one thing that still connects us all together, that's conversations. And conversations like this help us come together, see each other, and help us go beyond just these screens that separate us. And before I start, I just wanted to check in and say my mood. My mood today was very happy, is very happy, because as soon as I woke up, my daughter said, "What are you going to be doing today?" I said, "I'm going to be going here." And then this is something that we came up with, which is a lot of fun things. And she said, "Oh, you know what? I think you should take me in there." And we had a conversation about what happens, and we figured that there is a way in which she still could be present in here with us, even though she isn't here with us. So it gave me an idea, and I thought I will play with this format for a bit today. So this is my mood. Very happy to be here, very happy to share whatever little I know, whatever little I have garnered from experience. So what I am pronouncing today is not a theory, but a set of experiences and a request for you to consider them, just for you to see if these work with you as well. For some of you who perhaps don't know me that much, and it's only reasonable that you don't know me that much. If you want to find me, this is where you go find me. That's my Twitter handle, that's my website, and that's my organization's website as well. I'll just give you a brief explanation about the name. The name is Kavi Arasu. Kavi means poet in Tamil, which is a South Indian language. Kavi means poet, and Arasu means king. So literally it translates to the king of poets. So that's the background for you. So you have, well, you might have some, you might take some solace from of spending your time with a king, albeit of poetry, but still a king, so to speak.
Just to let you know, you've got more than one vote. You've got at least 2 people saying, please bring in your daughter. So if she's there and she wants to come and wave and say hi, we are very welcome to have her on. It's up to you.
Okay, so I mean, we've got 40 minutes to go. so I know if she comes in here, all of you would say, now please move out, let's talk to her. So anyways, so let's get going and let's talk about conversations. Today it's about conversations, and just a flow for the day. I'm just going to share with you some of my experiences, especially some of it with my dad. And I'm going to share what he taught me and how those impacted me later on in my own life. But the deal with conversations per se is this, that they are so simple and so simplistic that we sometimes dismiss their role of importance to us. We lead very busy lives. There's no question about it. The virus has slowed it down, but we lead very, very busy lives. Plus, the number of distractions that we have in our busyness is no small number. We are always notified about somebody wanting to talk to us or somebody doing something to whatever we did online. So we lead very distracted life. But that distraction has another small nuance to it. And that nuance is this. By somebody just clicking on our like button, by us having 1,000 connections on Facebook or on Instagram, we have a false sense that we are connected to a lot of people. But that connection is so false unless it's followed up through a conversation of sorts. If we don't talk to each other, we don't really get to know each other. And when we don't get to know each other, we really do not have a connection with each other. We have an acquaintance of each other, but we do not have a connection with each other. That's why it's so important to talk to each other. And whenever I talk about this, whenever I talk about this, I have a lot of people coming up and saying, but where is the time? Where is the time to sit down and speak? We have so many things to do. You know, time is a function of importance that we attest to a few things. And I would sincerely believe that it's important for us, even if it's going to be 5 minutes devoted to sitting down and talking to somebody, makes such a big difference, both to the other person and to ourselves. Without conversation, so what happens? Well, without conversations, there's a little bit of vacuousness in our lives. We lead very dry lives without conversations. For the first time after this virus has set in, people in my apartment complex walked out and talked to their neighbors. And that's something that's happened for the first time. People said hello, and I was quite intrigued by the surprised look from the other person when there was a response which said hello. Oh, this person talks. So you get to reach each other. Otherwise, we sit down and keep making up our minds about, will this person speak, or what are my priorities and what possibly are his or her priorities. In the late 90s, there was a beautiful book which was released. I'm not sure if many of us would have read it. And that book is called the Cluetrain Manifesto. The Cluetrain Manifesto came up as I said, in the late 90s. And there is a line in this book, which is a favorite line, and that's why this book stays right here very close to me. And there is a line in this book, and that line is, markets are conversations. And the way in which the whole thing is narrated in this book is this, that whenever there was in the good old days, when people went by and when people had expeditions, when traders went from one country to another, and when they came back, people used to come to markets for two reasons. One is to look at what new goods they have brought from other nations. But the second one is to sit down and talk to people who have seen other lands, just to talk and understand, what did you see? What kind of stories do you have for us in lands that are far away, lands that we have not been to? Now, the power in conversations can alter markets, because that's where humanity is. And it's important for us to realize and remember this, that if we need to build our humanity, the lowest common denominator for building that, the lowest common factor, is to be able to sit down and get to know one another. And if we need to get to know one another, there is no other way than conversations to start that process. Abraham Lincoln used to have a famous quote. I think it was attributed to him, but he said something like, I don't like that person. I don't like that man. I think I must get to know him better. If we need to know somebody better, there's no other way, no better way. There are many ways, of course, but there is no better way than being able to sit down and talk to another person. But I want to go back, as I said, I want to go back to my dad, and how I started out with this entire fascinating interest, my fascination with conversation. I'm an introverted person. I would much rather be and keep to myself, but conversations fascinate me. When I was about 9 or 10, maybe 11, he used to give me a small chunk of money and ask me to take the local bus in a small town called Madurai, down in the south. Asked me to take the local bus and go to the market and come back. And the only condition was I had to spend about 3 hours in the market all by myself. Those were different days, of course. So I had to go to the market, spend 3 to 4 hours in the market, and come back. And after I came back, after the first time, he used to sit me down and we had a conversation. And the conversation it went like this, is, what did you see today? And then he used to go in and say, who all did you talk to? For the first week, that was very good. But when he did it for the second week, I had to go to the same market and come back and tell him, what did I see? And the only condition this time was, you can't tell me what you saw last time. You'll have to tell me new things. So I had to really see, what do I tell the old man about what new do I see? And then he used to tell me, just go see, you'll see much more than what you possibly have seen so far. After that, the challenge levels, as they say, as the games of the current generation go, the challenge levels kept going up. And the challenge levels were then, who did you talk to today? And he would follow it up very quickly. It was very prescient of him at that point in time. I didn't realize all of this, of course. It was very playful at that time. It was very prescient of him at that time, because he used to ask me, who did you talk to? And then ask me, what questions did you ask them? It didn't strike me as big back then, but now I realize how important that was. Because every time I'm able to sit down and have a conversations with people, it's not necessarily about what I have to give, but it's about how curious I am about what they have to offer. But if I am able to ask questions, and if I'm genuinely interested in someone else, the conversation keeps flowing. It's not about them needing to be interested in me. It's about me needing to be interested in something that the other person possibly can offer. And if I'm curious enough, the conversation keeps flowing. And every conversation spawns new conversations. And that's something magical about our lives and about our times. And if we're able to reflect on what kind of conversations happen and how we are able to think about and reflect on those conversations and what new those conversations spawn. The last thing that he used to ask me, and that was also particularly him, is, what do you make of the answers? So these were the 4 questions. So it was almost often these were the 4 questions. What did you see today? Who did you talk to? What questions did you ask people? What do you make of the answers? And every time these used to be the questions, and just got me very present to, if I ask people different questions, if I'm genuinely curious about people, I will get to know more people, and more people, more and more and more people will be interested in talking to me and working with me and helping me. It used to be random people. Random people, as in there used to be a fruit seller. I remember the fruit seller in the market, because for the first time I didn't go to the fruit seller. I didn't have money to buy fruits from him, but I was going to have a conversation, because Dad would ask me as soon as I got home, who did you talk to new? So I used to go there and I used to ask him, I asked him some basic questions. Where do you get the fruits from? I remember those questions because the fruit seller looked at me and said, you've not come here to buy fruits. And I had to tell him, no, I just want to know. I'm curious about, where did you buy your fruits from? Where do you get your fruits from? And it took him a while to open up. And after that, he used to recognize me by face. And after about a few months, I could almost tell that he was waiting for me, because there was a conversation that was blossoming, and there was a relationship that was blossoming. And that's the beauty with conversations. Sustained, interested conversations help in the blossoming of relationships. And when relationships, yes, please, go on.
Can I ask you a question, Kavi?
Please,
Because
please.
it strikes me as fascinating that you are sharing how your dad basically had a system to teach you to engage in great conversations. The reason that really interests me is because I don't think most people have that background. I don't think most people have actually been taught how to engage, how to question, how to pay attention, how to, like, we learn that by osmosis, but your dad has like picked apart each of those sections and taught you. It's fascinating to me.
He was a professor. He was a professor of marketing, and he had worked with some of the leading limelights in that era. He had published books and all of that. So he understood market research quite a bit, and so he used to, at that time, and even later, even after he passed away, I didn't realize this is how it all connected. To me, at that point in time, he was just setting me up for a game. That's all I knew at that time. Even later, he didn't decode it for me this way. It was much later when I started working and when I found that these things were beginning to work for me. That's when I realized that this was at the underlying, this was the underbelly of his entire exercise. And that's what the good part is. That's what I'm setting my daughter up with these days, which is we have these fun conversations. Every day we have fun conversations about, can you ask me a few questions that you didn't ask me yesterday? So,
I bet she
so
loves playing that game. That's fantastic. Someone is asking you, could Kavi hold up the questions, please?
yes.
So
So
I'll relate to
what all did you see? Yeah. What all did you see?
So what did you
Who all
see?
who all did you talk to? What questions did you ask them? The last one was, what do you make of your answers? What do you make of the answers that you heard from them? So that question was extremely powerful because he used to leave me thinking about the answers by asking a few questions further on. He used to ask me, so why are you thinking? For instance, if the fruit seller had said that it's very tough to make a livelihood this way, for instance, I don't recall those conversations. He used to ask me, so what do you think about that answer? And I used to say, but I don't know. I think it's easy to make a livelihood. I don't know why he's saying that. And then he would leave me mulling over my own answers and my own predilections about another person's life conditions. Now, these are important things that, in my view, if we do to our children, and if we spread the word about being able to go forward and help them have these conversations with one another without being immersed solely in their devices and games, it's going to bring the world closer. That's at least what happened to me. Yes, Michelle, you had a question.
Absolutely, I agree with that. And given that we are speaking about conversations, what I'd like to be able to do is to invite you into the conversation, the collective you, the
Yes,
watchers of this talk. So,
yes.
as Kavi is going along, if there's something that's striking you or a specific question that you would like to ask, please feel free to go ahead and put it straight into the Q&A box, and I'll make sure that I jump in and ask Kavi that question. You don't mind me jumping in, do you,
Of
Kavi?
course not. I
Checking in
mean,
with you. Beautiful as we go.
yes.
I'm just still enamored by your father because he just sounds like the most clever, in touch human being. I don't know, but that's how you're portraying him.
Yeah, I mean, he was. He genuinely was. And he used to do a lot of market research, as I said, and he was studying how flowers were marketed, and he was always studying people, and he had a curious interest, and he had a wicked sense of humor as well. So whenever I used to go back and ask him, why are you sending me to the market? Because sometimes it used to get plain boring. And I used to ask him, why are you sending me to the market? He said, I can't stand you here. Just get lost.
So he's very
Uh,
honest as well.
yeah, so he wasn't making it sound very big. He was making it very playful at that time, and he never decoded it for me. And he left all the decoding to be done by me, and that was part of his game. And upon reflection over a period of time, I think I have a model in my mind, and this is my model. I call it the 3x3 model. This is my model. It's not his model. It's just my model. If we do three things, and if we have three attributes with us, I think we will be able to have better conversations. This is just one simplistic way in which I have put these together for myself. I have spoken to people, and when I work with people, this is a model that I have for myself. All of this, the reason why I bring my dad into this is because it's courtesy him. It's not. It's got nothing to do with me. But he didn't frame it this way. It's that framing is mine. The first thing is the three things that we possibly can do. The first thing that we possibly can do is to be listen better. It's these seem very simple. Of course, listen. What do you mean? Yes. Well, the point is we don't do much of it. Many of us, including me, many of us are comfortable listening to ourselves and how we sound, listening to the other, listening beyond the words, listening to the context, and all of that makes listening so important. That's listening. The second thing that I think is extremely important, equally important, if not more important, is the bit that I've already spoken about, is questions. And you can see my daughter's handwork there. So you will have to excuse the writing, but this is questions. It's about asking great questions. If there is just one skill that I could get better at, I would always ask for, I just want to ask great questions, because it's never in the answers. It's always in being able to ask great questions, ask good questions, and then leave the other person thinking. Many of us make the mistake of, and we're all schooled that way, that we're all schooled and we're all trained to provide great answers. Very rarely do we even step back and think about, what kind of questions am I asking?
So,
So,
so on that, someone is asking a great question. So I'm going to
yeah,
pass it on to you. And the
yeah,
question is about stranger danger and kids. And
yes.
this person's saying, how do you encourage kids to have conversations with others in the light of stranger danger?
Yes, as I said, in my days that wasn't the case, but in the current days, the conversations that we have between me and my daughter, with people that she knows, people that she trusts. What kind of questions did you ask your friends? What kind of questions did you ask your teacher? What kind of people did you meet in the school today? Did you say hello to someone new in the school? Because it's all protected in the school. Stranger danger is a big part of all our lives anywhere in the world, but it's not binary. Even within the boundaries, within safe boundaries, if children are encouraged to ask great questions, and we've got to find imagination ruling more there, and if we can use our imagination and help children ask great questions to people who know each other, even to us. Some of the nights when I'm really thrilled are when my daughter comes up and asks some great questions, and those questions are just not why is this happening or what is happening, but some of the questions that she asks sometimes can be really powerful. For instance, the one question is, "What do you do really?" is a is a very
What do you
powerful
do
question.
really, Dad, apart from
Uh,
talk for a living?
yes. What do you do really? And
I think if I can just add something here in
yeah,
listening to what you're saying, I think one of the other things that's striking me as so powerful is that in the way that you're teaching your kids and that your dad taught you to question and go through that process, you're effectively teaching a very structured mechanism of self-reflection. And again, that's not something that the majority of us are taught to do. Usually we come to that when we're older, when we're adults, when we realize that our life is not working how we want it to, and we start to engage and reflect and look back on things. But so is that one of the intents behind why you get your daughter to engage like that?
I haven't gotten that far. I'm more in the realm of, if she's able to ask a lot of questions, she's going to be more curious about things. I want her to be less sure, and I want her to be more curious about and be more present to opportunities and possibilities. In my view, schooling and education teaches certainty. And I think in the uncertain world that we live in, I think we need more questions and be more or open to opportunities and possibilities, and questions bring alive those opportunities and possibilities, and just open discovery of each other and discovery of possibilities thereon.
Mm.
That's why I work with. And the third one is the one that I have about bias. Are we present to our own biases? So I had a 3 by 3 matrix. I had a 3 by 3, and then the first one was about listening. The second one was about questions. The third one is about awareness of our own biases and preferences. What's our bias, and how do we process the answers that come from there? And in this time of social distancing, uh, the one thing that we are going to fall short of terribly is the ability to come together and have serendipitous conversations. You just bump into one another and have those conversations. Now, what you are ending up doing in a forum like this is you're bringing a bunch of people, diverse people together, and you're bringing alive the possibility of serendipity and from their blossoming conversations, and that's been on our minds as well. And I just wanted to speak for 1 minute before I go to the next three, that we hold something called the sounding, the singing bowl conversation. So if you're familiar with the singing bowl is a Tibetan bell, which you clang once and then it reverberates for a long time. So we've been bringing disparate and diverse groups of people together, help them sit down, and we just have a conversation where the only request to people is, please listen to what the other person is saying, and be alive to the possibilities. And we have a graphic artist who captures what comes from the conversation, and then we put it back to the people. And this is the last conversation that we had. So you see here what people came up with about being still, the importance of being alive to possibilities, the importance of really wanting to do things, and the fear of thinking that possibly all what I'm doing now I may not be able to do in the future, and wanting to keep a part of being locked down in the future as well. So what this conversation circles do is they just bring people together. And the aspect of serendipity, the aspect of just bumping into somebody and having a good conversation, that is extremely important as well, for which the second three, so the three things that we spoke of, the first three, which was about listening, questioning, and biases, and now we go to the second three, which is about being able, which is about being very, very the first one I would have is being very courageous. A little bit of courage is required for conversations. If I go approach somebody and talk, I don't know if that person will engage with me or if that person will just walk away. How will I handle that rejection, so to speak? Can I ask this question? Can I not ask this question? It requires a little bit of courage, but with a little bit of courage, we can go a far distance. The second one that I have is curiosity. Curiosity in a nice way of being really interested in the other person. And when we are interested in the other person and what the other person can offer to us, we engage in deeper conversation. And the last bit is about humility, being really, really humble and being willing to receive what comes from the other person. So I have a 3x3. If you are able to listen well and ask great questions and be aware of our own biases, those are things that we can do. And in the being, if we are courageous and if we are humble and if we are curious, we end up having fantastic conversations. So that's the model which my dad, I learned from my dad, and I just kind of weave it into the work that I do now as well. And the work that I do now is in helping me and a few others on this call as well. The work that we do now is in helping organizations shift gears and change. And in all of this, we don't go in with a prescription, but we go in with, let's sit down and talk. Let's sit down and hear what you have to say. And that changes the modality of the work that we do together.
We've
What
got
playfully...
questions. So you let
Yes,
me
please.
know when you're fine for me to jump in.
Yes,
Keep going
yes.
if you need to.
I'm just going to take just a minute more, and then we're going to have a
Perfect.
conversation.
Perfect.
So the modality of the work is when we are courageous, when we are curious, and when we are humble. We are able to strike great conversations and connections. And when we have a conversation and a connection, the kind of work and the kind of output that comes from work is of a different order than walking in with a prescription. Okay, and that's what I had to say. Michelle, yes, we can have the question.
I understand when you're in flow, you've just got to say things. I totally get that. That's fine. So there's 3 questions for you. Question number 1 was, one person wants you to revisit what you said about humility. I think you said it in a particular context.
Okay. Do I finish? And then we'll have the next question?
Yeah, perfect.
Okay, all right, okay. So humility is about being open to what the other person is saying and not be either too dismissive or too submissive to receive everything from the other person and accept what's coming from the other person. Humility is about, I have a few experiences. It may or may not be right in your context, but I'm humble enough to receive what you are telling me. it may not sit well with my past experience. And many of us, when it does not sit well with our past experience, turn dismissive about an idea when it comes from another person. When we dismiss, we do not dismiss, we do not end up dismissing just the message. Oftentimes we end up dismissing the person as well. And there begins what was a possibility of an opportunity of a coming together nosedives. And that's why it's important to be humble enough to receive what the other person is saying without sitting on judgment, irrespective of what our own experiences with what the other person has said. It's not
Absolutely.
easy. It's not easy. It's very difficult, but it's something that we can practice over a period of time and get.
Absolutely. Beautiful answer. Okay, so this question is, could this lead to randomizing? Will there be focus through such an approach? Now, I don't exactly know what that was in relation to. So that's Padma Kumar. If you don't mind clarifying that question, and we might come back to that one. So if you can deal with this one for us, Kavi, how to make kids understand to think and speak in order to build the relationship.
Sure. You know, I do only one thing, or maybe two, which is to get my daughter to ask great questions and be interested in her answers. Interested in her answers to the point that sometimes she comes back and says, "Please, Dad, no more questions." So, which is when I flip it over and say, "Very good. You ask me the questions. Let's play the question game." So the focus is on questions, and it's rubbing off on her. It's early days still, but it's rubbing off on her. And the way in which she's been able to reflect, and the way in which she's been able to establish connections with other kids has been, in my view, I am a dad, and therefore I will be biased, but in my biased view, I think it's a notch different than many other kids. And therefore, it's very important for me to acknowledge that she's got her own courage and humility as well, and she's very playful. It doesn't work all the time, but she at least understands the importance of asking great questions, and that's the way in which I'm building up with her. The other thing that I also do is I'm not too focused on answers. I ask a simple question, and the answer is not forthcoming. I'm not sitting there insisting that I have to have an answer, or I have to have the right answer. So I'm open to answers. I'm open to any answers, and playing with that helps her becoming more fluid in the moment. And I sometimes go to her school and engage with kids from her school as part of a parent community activity with other children. And I see this with all kids. You just need to trigger curiosity in them, and you ask questions to them, and you can see them just blossom up. And
You're
then
also
it's
teaching them to think in that process. You are teaching them to go down inside a process, and you're teaching them to reflect and think and dig deeply. And that's so important. So this person's come back to clarify their question. So this is it. Asking questions without a focused approach, will that lead to randomizing?
Well, possibly, and the context here is about getting to know people and having a conversation. And if I'm interested in someone else, questions further conversations. And again, the agenda for the conversation is dictated by the other person and the interest that the other person brings to the table. And just staying curious with what the other person brings to the table brings enough focus to the conversation and keeps the conversation moving forward. So it's not a random thing that I'm asking a conversation about, but I'm asking a question because I'm curious about what the other person has brought to the table. So that's the way in which the focus and the flow starts, and that's the way in which the conversation keeps moving on.
I don't know, Kavi, are you aware of Fran Peavy's work on strategic questioning? Do you know her work at all?
No, I'm not. I'm not aware of that. I'll make a
It
note of
just
that.
really fits in beautifully with what you're talking about. She was a social researcher. She was an English lady. She's died now. And she
Okay.
always talked about using questioning and layered questioning as a research technique that really helps you get to what people are truly feeling. Because what she always used to talk about was, you know, if I come up to you and I'm meeting you and I say, "Hi, Kavi, how are you?" You're going to say, "Well, I'm fine." You know, and it might take me 3 or 4 or 5 different layers of questioning till actually I find out Kavi is not fine at all. He's very upset today because
Yes.
something happened that morning, you know.
Yes.
So she goes through this process and this technique that you can use in order to be able to dig deep from a questioning
Okay.
point of view. She's a fantastic resource.
Thank you for that. I will look her up as soon as this is over. As soon as this is over, and that's why listening becomes important, and that's why the layers and questions also become important. If I ask a very superficial question, as "How are you?" Many a time somebody told me, "How are you?" is not a question. "How are you?" is a greeting, because you reply. You're taught to reply how are you. You're taught to reply, "Yes, I'm fine, thank you. How are you?" Uh, so it's not really a question of sorts, and therefore you need to have better questions to get into conversation. So I mean, some of us may need to think about, are there better questions I can start a conversation with, which is not intrusive at the same time, which can start something going, and that's extremely important. And the second piece I wanted to talk to you about just that is about how do you listen. You brought that out very nicely, which is when I'm saying I'm fine. Are you just listening to the words "I'm fine"? Are you listening to my tone? You're listening to something more than "I'm just fine," and you're processing it differently, and you're able to unearth that possibly he's not fine, and there is something more. So listening deeply makes such a big difference as well. So listening is just not listening to words, but listening to far more than just the mere words.
So someone else has a question. How will asking questions change when the context is in having a difficult conversation?
Yes, asking questions is easier when we want to get started with, but when it's very difficult, it's a difficult conversation. It is the layer of questions, the ladder of questions. It reaches a different space. Um, the questions when having a difficult conversation is usually about generating choices, and it's not really about finding an answer. It's about, okay, what kind of choices do we have here, as a mutual exploration when it comes to having a difficult conversation and whittling it down to what's a possible way of closing that conversation forward. But it's important to remember that it's not a solution for all situations, but it's a great move forward to closure. If I am able to have questions that help the other person think and not necessarily just have an answer. Many a times there are, after a conversation which has been very difficult, the person does not agree with what I say, or maybe I don't agree with what the other person has just said, and it's a difficult conversation. And after it's over, I'm left still thinking about the conversation. Many a times people have come back after a conversation saying, "You know what, I said this yesterday, but actually I think differently now." So that conversation has left people thinking about something that they said or something that they perhaps would have wanted to say. And therefore, it's just not a question of finding an answer right there, but it's about what else it does. So difficult conversations are about having an array of choice generating questions. It's about having a different standard of questions to be able to wade through difficult conversations. That's been my experience, at least.
Yeah, I entirely agree. And I just wanted to add, I'm interested if you feel the same way or different from what I'm about to say, Kavi, but AJ and I do very similar work in organizations to what you're describing. And I often say to my team that as consultants, the reason that you're brought into an organization to go through a process or create an outcome or whatever is purely because they need you to sit and listen. Because generally, no one else in that business is listening. At least not listening in the way that needs to occur for change to happen. And I think that organizations, for a whole range of reasons, it's another talk, but organizations lend themselves to a whole series of humans that do not feel listened to or connected or heard. Did you want to comment about that at all?
I can't help agree with that more. And there's something else that happens as well, that when we provide the space, when we hold the space for someone else to talk, and when we listen so intently, many a time solutions come from there. Even as they're speaking, there are things that emerge for them. And I've had leaders who say, just come in and let's have a conversation. Because in the conversation, I'm sure I'll get a solution for myself from what I have, from what's inside me. And in the modern world, just being listened to is such a special gift that people can soak in with. And I think organizations live in this cesspool of having conversations just within, and they can be so limiting. But if we are able to provide that space for people to jump out and have conversations beyond, and when we listen in deeply, and when we encourage others, we give people a framework to listen, not by drawing a framework, but by embodying listening, we find that organizations really open up and move forward. Many a times we don't need to do much. We just need to be there, like what you're saying. We just need to be there and just to be able to hear, and in the process of hearing, things get solved for many people. That's been our experience as well.
Yeah, someone's saying often, yes, people just need to talk it out loud and come up with their own answers, and listening is a gift. And someone else is saying being listened to, sorry, is so incredibly powerful. And on the talk before yours, we were talking about music and sound and how healing that is. But I think very much in my own life, I've found that if there are humans around me that are exceptional at listening through rather than listening to, they're the ones that I come away from feeling truly deeply accepted and loved and nurtured. And that's a very unique feeling, because not a lot of people can do that.
Yeah, I mean, that's touched me, and I think the most profound gift that we can give one another is to be able to just sit down and listen to another person. And when we listen deeply to another person, we don't have to say much, just to be able to listen with all our patience and our presence is perhaps the best gift that we can give to one another. And when we do that, like what I think Faith is saying is, when we do that, is we just give the best gift to the other person. And, and and it's the best gift that we can give ourselves to. It's the best gift that we can give ourselves to, because it just changes our trajectory, changes our understanding of what's happening around us.
What I'm going to do, Stephen, you put in someone else's, I think it was Rajesh's question or something from Facebook. Can you just drop it in the feed again for me so that it's right on my screen? In the meantime, Kavi, we've got another question here for you. Is there, and I hope you'll find that we just go into questions as the way to wrap up the conversation.
Yes.
We're nearing
Yes.
the end. So this question is there a Kavi framework for listening?
Well, there is, I mean, it's not mine, of course. There is just a level 1, level 2, level 3 of listening, which is there. You just briefly touched upon. Level 1 refers to if we just listen to words. Level 2 is also words and tonality. And level 3 is when we listen not only to the words and tonality, but also to the context of what's getting said, when, where, who else is there. Many a times things get said not just because of the conversation, but because of the context that surrounds us as well. To be able to listen in to just not just the word, but far beyond the words, make listening so powerful. And many a times you will realize that when you don't feel listened to, it's not that the other person is not paying attention to us, but the other person is not able to go beyond what I am saying. And listening is to go deeper, just not listen to what I am saying, but listen to the words and the tone and the context, and to stay curious is important. And there is a lot of material on the internet about level 1, level 2, and level 3 of listening. And we've just used some of that into our work, but that's the frameworks that we follow.
Beautiful. So someone else is talking about the notion of clarity and wants to know if you think clarity is important.
Yes, clarity is important, and questions come greatly handy there, which means to be able to help clarity emerge in a conversation. So conversations don't go linear, conversations go exponential when you just keep building on top of each other, which means if it's here, I ask a question, then it climbs to a different level. Then somebody else asks another question, I ask another question, climbs to a different level. So to be able to build conversations up, we need to clarify and we need to help clarity emerge in that conversation, which requires, again, being able to ask great questions and listen deeply, and being very humble about whatever emerges from that. And clarity is an extremely important component. Good questions make it easier for us to get that out.
Someone said here, and I don't know if this was off the back of something you said, I think it was all about curiosity. I want her to be less sure and more curious. You must have said that about your daughter. Is that right?
Yes, yes, yes.
Less sure and more curious. Hallelujah. I would drink to that.
Yes, because school teaches certainty, and there is nothing called certainty in the world any further. So we need to be very prepared for the uncertain. And the best way, in my view, to be prepared for the uncertain is to be curious and is to be able to ask a lot of questions.
Yeah. All right. So this person's question is, and you guys are writing great, and girls are writing great questions. So bring them on. They're fantastic. If someone is not able to completely listen beyond what I am saying, does it make sense to be explicit in what we say? Put out everything you want to say to the open, including our intent, context, emotion.
Yes, great question again. The onus of the conversation, I always believe the onus of the conversation is on me. It's not on the other person. Even if the other person, so even if the other person isn't listening, or even if the other person isn't asking great questions, the onus of the conversation is on me. So the moment I assume responsibility for the conversation to flower, I realize that the other person isn't listening. Can I bring awareness to the other person about something that I want to say, my need to get listened to? And if that isn't forthcoming, then perhaps it's important for me to come back and say, these are my requests from you. This is exactly what I want, and this is the intent behind the conversation. As what the person has just said, to make it explicit is important, but I would think there is a dance to a conversation, and it's a flow. There is an art and there is a dance to it. In my view, and this is my limited view, is making things explicit right at the beginning sometimes robs the magic from a conversation. I've often found that when I go in and say, listen, I've come to you with 1, 2, 3, 4, and I want to discuss just 1, 2, 3, 4. And vis-a-vis going into a conversation saying, hey, how are you? I want to talk to you. We have 20 minutes. And then maybe I will definitely get the 1, 2, 3, 4 through, but serendipitously, the other things that we draw out of that conversation are sometimes far bigger than the 1, 2, 3, 4. And therefore, for me, making things very explicit sometimes takes the magic out of the conversation. So there's a Sufi saying, there's a very good Sufi saying. The saying goes like this: that the magician is real, but the magic is false. So very similarly, what you don't see in the conversation seems false. It's only you that is present there. But to make it very explicit takes the joy out of the magic. And imagine going to a magic show and the magician says, this is the trick that I use and this is the back end of the trick. You're saying, oh, is that it?
Absolutely. And I think one of the other interesting elements that I've been reflecting on in this conversation is that, and especially off the back of what you've just said, is that the person who has the highest need for control in a conversation is the person who's going to be most frustrated by the end of it.
Thank you for bringing that in. Yeah, yeah. It's like a river. It just flows. And if I am going to say that, listen, I have to control the conversation to flow in a particular direction, well, you're acting as a dam. If you're acting as a dam, you better be impregnable. And there is going to be a current. There is going to be electricity which is generated, which if you don't handle it well, you know what happens.
Absolutely, absolutely. So for those of you who are listening, now is your time. If you have any other questions for Kavi, then please go ahead and drop them in the Q&A box or on Facebook. So we've got another one here. If children become more, lots of children questions, which is fantastic. If children become more unsure and curious, will they be able to fit in? What an interesting question.
Yes. I'm just taking a moment to consider where to come to that answer from, because there are so many answers that are flooding in. If they are curious, the amount of ways that they generate for themselves, the amount of pathways that they generate for themselves is immeasurable, that they don't need to fit in. They are going to create their own pathways to success. And what do they need, after all, to fit into when they are born free?
And I would say, as a society in general, our need or desire to fit in is way too high. Like, why do we want to fit in? Why
Yes.
don't we want to be exactly who we are and say what we think and say what we mean, and not in a way that harms other people around us, but just in a way that's really authentic and genuine about who we are as people? Otherwise, you have this idea or this desire, over desire for fitting in, can mean that you hide your light and you end up, putting yourself down below, and people aren't seeing your uniqueness or your message.
That's right. And over a period of time, that also leads to a lot of frustration for people. When I'm not able to show who I am, and if I'm not able to live the life that I wanted to. And in the singing bowl conversations that we hosted, one of the things that kept coming back when we asked people, when people spoke about the lockdown and what people were doing during the lockdown, one of the things that kept coming back was, I always wanted to do this, but I ended up doing something else. But in this lockdown, I'm picking back what I wanted to really do, and I'm really happy picking back things up, because I'm not interested in a way, fitting into my job like what I used to, because now I have the time. And one of the things that people said I want to take forward is, maybe I will try and experiment more with what I really wanted to do with my life. So I would really encourage that we should allow our kids to flower, and they will find ways to get the world to fit in to a broader, in a broader sense. And we should have the courage and the humility and the curiosity to do that.
Absolutely. All right, two more, and then we're going to wrap it up, everyone. Thank you for your questions. They've been fantastic. This one is about kids and technology. Basically, the person is saying, if your kids are so obsessed by technology, how do you get them to fall in love with conversation?
Yeah. Kids are, technology is part of our lives. And so we can't, in my view, we can't, and we should not, this is my view, keep kids away from technology. So we've got to find a way in which we weave technology into our lives as well. But if we are interested in things outside of technology, our kids get interested in what we are interested in as well. If I'm interested in walking and looking at plants, and the exercise that we did just before the lockdown was to buy a magnifying glass and go to the garden and look at veins in leaves, and we just kept doing that for a bit. And when we came back, we did look up Google, and we did look up we did use technology to process that, but the processing was just enough energy for us to go back down and check what was happening with the leaves and what was happening with the plant. So it is possible for us to wean our children away, but it is not possible. In my case, it has not been possible to wean her away from technology by saying, don't go to technology. I have had to be interested along with her in something else other than technology. And then she's automatically drawn to what I am interested in, and I am drawn to what she's interested in as well. So when we do joint activities outside of technology and we use technology to record it or technology to put it back in, then it's a nice little bridge between technology and real life. So it's not about not getting them not to do it, but it's about finding ways in which they get to the real world. That's been my experience as well.
At the end of the day, kids copy us, don't they? And
absolutely.
So
yeah, absolutely.
That's modeling. Okay, the very, very last question, and then we're going to wrap up in order to meet our 5 o'clock time frame. And this question is, your 3x3 models are great. How do we get granular and do things to be great at the 3x3s?
Yeah, sure. The three things that we possibly can do, which is questions, listening, and getting aware of our own biases. There's enough and more material available on the internet for each of those. Each of those is an ocean by itself. There's a lot of material available, and if there is anything specific that you would want, I mean, I'm happy to. I've given you my coordinates, and I will show it again. Happy to answer. Happy to work with any of us to get better with any of those. On the side of courage, curiosity, and humility, it comes with a lot of practice. It comes with a lot of being able to work them better. Those are muscles that we need to work, metaphorical muscles that we need to work better. We need to get courageous, to get curious, to get humble. And when we get humble, we get more courageous. So in a way, it's a virtuous cycle. We just need to step into one and have the courage to step into the next. And that takes us further. But courage, we don't mean some giant step. It needs one small step at the horizon of what we think is our possibility. And it's just that one small step, or maybe talking to somebody. And so if it was about, as a message to all of us, maybe talk to somebody who you haven't spoken to for a while. Maybe, and it's not like a email conversation. Maybe pick up the phone and hear the voice and see what else comes up. And that courage and that curiosity and that humility about saying, what else is this person saying, will in itself be enough energy for us to get propelled into the next layer of courage. And that's how it starts. It's just a virtuous cycle of able to go from one to the other, one to the other, one to the other. So it just works very well if only we get started. So my call out to everybody is, let's get started talking to each other. And you never know where that's going to lead us to.
Absolutely. It actually could change the world.
It will. And that's the only thing that's possible. The way in which how divided we are, if only we start talking to each other, we get to see where each other is coming from. And when we see and know where the other person is coming from, that changes the world.
Thank you.
Social distancing is reduced by conversation. So we need to talk more.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for your masterful insight into all things conversation. And I hope everyone is inspired to go away and to either have a different kind of a conversation with someone, or to, as Kavi's saying, have a conversation with someone that you haven't had one with for a while, or potentially a new person. So either way, bring on the conversations is what we're saying. Yeah. So thank you so much for all your contribution as we've been going along. If you want to know what else is on tonight, we have Ankush, and he's on at 7 o'clock with AJ. So feel free to jump back on then. And we're on day 5. So we have 3 more days. We are still chock full of incredible speakers. So feel absolutely free to either get onto our Human Power link, which will take you straight into the summit so that you can work out which speakers you want to hear, and or get into our Facebook group. And the Facebook group name is the SuperHuman Summit. So thank you so much for asking all your questions. And again, Kavi, thank you so much for your time and energy and wisdom.
Absolute pleasure. Thank you so much.
Okay. Cheers.